It is a real pleasure to be here. I am delighted to be continuing to work with SCAPE and a range of people in the Christchurch arts community towards the next biennial. It's a great responsibility, it's a great challenge, and I'm looking forward to it enormously. But tonight, we're not going to be, I guess, talking about or thinking directly about Christchurch, but about a very different situation, that in China. And no one better to speak about that than Biljana Ciric. Now, Biljana I met for the first time a few years ago on her first visit to Australia, when she travelled through with the support of the Contemporary Arts Centre of South Australia and met a number of artists, gave some public presentations, and I guess excited a number of us about the type of projects that she had been working on and continues to work on. She has a very distinguished record of work based in Shanghai over a number of years now. As she spoke about this morning, she was formerly, she did formerly work as a director of the curatorial department at the Shanghai Jiulun Museum of Modern Art. So in an institutional context, and that's something that she spoke about this morning, the relationship between working in an institution and in fact working as an institution. And she's been involved, and I guess in various forms of curatorial models, exhibition practices, from biennials to museums to independent projects. Her own projects include Migration Addicts, presented at the 52nd Venice Biennale, so that's 2007, as part of the Collateral Events Program, and at the Shenzhen and Hong Kong Bi-City Biennial of Urbanism and Architecture. She has curated a number of projects. I want to refer particularly to the public art project Intrude 366, held in 2008 in Shanghai, a project involving an individual project for every day of the year through 2008. History in the Making, Shanghai 1979 to 2009, a 30 years retrospective of the Shanghai contemporary culture in 2009. And that project, again, she spoke about today in terms of the importance, I guess, of thinking about history and memory and the basis from which contemporary culture is generated in a relationship to that contemporary culture. Recent projects include the institution of or as the future, which is something that was the basis of her talk this morning, Institution for the Future. And the range of artists that Biljana spoke about and the types of practices, I guess almost as kind of spanning a Pan-Asian region, presented in Manchester last year, and thinking about the way in which artists themselves conceive of institution building or alternative models to the type of institutions that the art world is based upon, that are perhaps increasingly precarious, I think was a really fascinating introduction to our 2 days of work. And so I urge you to have a look at that talk or listen to that talk on the SCAPE website in a few days when that's up. But tonight a very different topic, understanding of public space in China and re-establishing a public sphere through art. I guess this talk, from what we understand, will be around a sort of historical sweep about understanding or thinking about what actually constitutes public space in a very different cultural and historical situation. Biljana is going to talk about public space in a traditional Chinese culture through to the appearance of public monuments or monumentalism during the Mao era, and through to a current state of commercialisation, I guess that ubiquitous occupation of public space that we are so used to globally in an urban environment nowadays. She says that focusing on the changing relationship between artists, this talk, and the state, between artists and the state, this talk will introduce some recent artists who are working to rebuild the public realm, I think a very important phrase for the situation here in Christchurch, through innovative artist-initiated projects. So I think it's going to be a fabulous talk. Biljana, welcome. As I'd like to echo Deborah's welcome. It's wonderful to have you here at the third attempt, and the floor is yours.
Good evening. Can you hear me well? Is it working? Okay. Yes. Okay, good evening. Thank you, Deborah, and thank you, Blair, for introduction again. This talk is going to be slightly different from this morning's workshop lecture, which was mostly introduction around my recent project that Blair mentioned, Institution for the Future. Actually, this is expanding into the book that will be published by the Corner House and Chinese Arts Center in late September this year, actually asking international artists, curators, and activists to provide their own ideas what kind of institutions we need in the future and we think would actually make a change in the future. Probably Blair at the very beginning invited me to give a talk on art in public space or public art because of the Intrude project that I was involved in 2008. That was actually a museum-initiated project in Shanghai through the whole year. So I was running the team of 10 young people making this crazy project happen. So we basically had one project per day and one artist per day, international and local artists. So I will go to the project a little bit later. But actually, I'm going to read the paper because this actually developed from the Intrude through these 2 years of keep inviting me to SCAPE to some kind of paper draft. So I started digging a little bit on traditional Chinese concept of the public sphere and did actually existed. So I think it's a very interesting topic. So I might in the future develop it in a proper paper. I hope you will not fall asleep, but if you, I will wake you up because I like waking up people. I gave a talk a few days ago and they called me CCTV Eye because the guy was sleeping at the very end. I said, excuse me, can you just wake up the man? So I'll do that the same. Public sphere that I will discuss today, it's actually very much related to urban areas and the development of the cities in China, which actually means that I am going to exclude 60% of China, which is rural area, and which is very different issue to be discussed to a very different paper. So I'm not going to touch upon this issue. So public sphere in the context of Western understanding, it's a very new concept in China. It appeared with the development of city-urban planning actually in the last 100 years. But were there any space that could be taken function of a public sphere in traditional China is a very interesting issue that we could look at. When we talk about the public sphere today, we often discuss public sphere that was defined by Habermas, in which concept basically relates to the time of 18th century Europe. And it is taken as a space for critical discussion, open to all, and where discussion basically happen out of the control of the state. It is a place where individuals exchange their knowledge and their opinion. Within the rays of coffee shop, newspapers, etc. in Europe, the public sphere gained its critical nature. And that's basically what I was interested in, searching for some kind of a critical nature of the public sphere that actually could exist or potentially existed in China. Notion of the public sphere defined by Habermas could be hardly appropriated in the context of China's tradition, where public sphere is not clearly distinctive from the country affairs or official affairs, but happen between boundaries of self-organized and official literati action. Maybe I wait. So many Chinese scholars argue that the concept of public space and sphere actually existed in the Chinese traditional culture, but in a very different way. Matteo Ricci, who was one of the important missionaries, in one of his writings from 1609, mentioned imperial examinations of level of cities, like in Beijing and Nanjing, where over 4,000 scholars and their discussion during the examination time could be compared to, basically they could not be compared to anything that he has seen before in Europe. So maybe you know imperial examinations were very important to climb up to official systems. So basically Chinese men were educated from 3 years old, 4 years old to pass all this examination. It's a very big process. So this is how, I took some reference from the painting. This is how they existed in the Song Dynasty. Song Dynasty is 12th century. So in many analyses of traditional Chinese culture, official, we call it Guan, or Gong public, have been taken in opposition when we talk about elite involvement. One of the important scholars that touch upon public sphere and intellectual involvement in his teaching is a late Ming Dynasty scholar called Wang Yang and his teaching of the School of Mind, claiming that knowing is doing, that we discussed today later in the talk, which has been taken as an open call to elite to actually act. Wang believed that only through simultaneous action could only gain knowledge, denying all other ways of gaining it. He believed that knowledge and action were unified as one. So I'm going to just give you a very picturesque idea of how the actually examination were. This is actually a very famous painting from 16th century, actually Ming Dynasty. That was the period where Wang Yang and his school of mind were present. And this is a process of examination in Qing Dynasty, this is the last dynasty, that actually where candidates enter the examination hall. After the death of Wang Yang, his follower, He Xinyi, continued to spread his teaching with idea that streets are full of sages that were actually preaching to the masses. Wang Yang followers during the 15th and 17th century, during the appearance of patronage amongst rich merchants in Jiangnan area. Jiangnan area is the south of China. We still call it Jiangnan. Also, Shanghai belongs to that area. Actually started getting financial help to open up academia. This is Wang Yang. This academia became a center of development of political discourse in discussion. So basically, Jiangnan merchants sold Chinese goods for the Spanish silver, became very important patrons during the 15th to 17th century of the painters and intellectuals, started supporting publishing and opening public academias that were very important for the intellectuals of this time. These academies took a role of a strong opposition to the ruling system. And these scholars could be seen as a very early attempt towards public sphere and its function inside the society. One of the most important influential movements is the Dongling movement of the Dongling school in Wuxi. Wuxi is a small town, relatively small town for China. It's 1 hour from Shanghai. The school was established in 1604 with the support of local officials and the gentry. Motivation for establishing academy is related to the states and bureaucracy in the country and inability of its improvement with the goal to represent Confucian moral tradition. Academy acted till 1622 when it was closed and the head of academy and few other members executed. So this is actually what physically left of the Dongling Academy in Wuxi. So just the entering gate of the academy. The Confucianism that developed during the late Ming and Qing dynasty changed perception of learning as acting, where this foundation served for future reform proposals amongst many scholars and their involvement in public sphere as proposal for civil society. That is a very big issue till today in China. So I will discuss there are two important figures in the early 20th century. One is Kang You-wei, a very important reformist. Another is Liang Qichao. So I will say a few more words about Liang Qichao and his involvement. Taking this tradition of Neo-Confucianism, Kang You-wei and Liang Qichao will continue during 19th century discussion of reform system and reform movement that actually started in 1898. Will bring up the rise of newspapers and publishing that will develop important public sphere under the influence of intelligentsia of that time. During late Qing dynasty, Liang Qichao will open one of the earliest intellectuals emphasized newspapers And he was very, he had a very specific approach to the newspaper. He saw a newspaper as an important weapon to communicate political idea, where he actively used newspaper and journalism throughout his career. Liang seen newspaper as mirror and the lamp for the future. He categorized newspaper into 4 types: the newspaper of an individual, of a party, of a nation, and of the world. So ultimately, his goal was to produce the newspaper of the world, because, as he proclaimed, a newspaper of the world serves the interest to all humanity. His work and the constant calls for reforms were one of the first attempts to discuss democracy in China, and he established a newspaper called New Citizen that actually existed from 2002 to 2007. First issue was actually printed in Yokohama. The newspaper existed for 5 years and established around 200,000 of its readership. And his activities will give a foundation for development of public voice of intellectual in China in early 20th century and new cultural movement, and acknowledge the public square platform for sharing the views of new society and its values. So another issue that I will discuss besides building the public sphere through the publishing is actually building of the physical public space, and that has a function of the public space that we conceive today. And through the example of the Shanghai Bund area, we say Bund area is the area near the Huangpu River. It has the same title till today, and it's considered in China one of the first public spaces. And of course, it's very much developed through the colonial time and negotiation of the space between China state and British. During colonial time in China, one of the big influences of city development and infrastructure is building of city public space, taken as an important part of the city's planning. One of the earliest examples of the public space is the rebuilding of the public area in Bund. This is the Shanghai Bund area, so this promenade area. I'll show you later how it actually changed. In 1879, British and American concessions, Shanghai was divided in concessions. So you had the international settlement, French concession, Japanese concession, etc., where foreigners lived. So in 1879, British and American concession authorities built up the first green area around the street over the Bund area. Area became important part of a communal life of foreign and Chinese community during that time, presenting early formation of the modern public space. A long building of a public garden started in 1864. So this is the first public park or garden that we define as today, when Mr. Clark submitted the plans for building the first public garden to the Chinese government. Although open to the public in 1868, so 4 years later, and designed much according to the tradition of the British garden, caused controversy due to discrimination of Chinese to enter the garden, where there were regulations that only well-dressed Chinese are allowed to enter. So municipality resolved the conflict a few years later in 1890, setting up a new garden which was absolutely next door to this garden. It's a north side of the public garden that will be open to everybody. But the fact is that the foreigners and the rich Chinese went to the previous garden, and the new garden was basically used by the lower class Chinese. In 2009, during the Shanghai Biennale, one of the artists based in Shanghai did a reference on this. Was a satellite show where actually there was in the historical books you can see that there is actually plate where you say that the Chinese cannot enter. There was a public announcement, and during the Shanghai Biennale in 2000, the guards were standing in front of the Shanghai Art Museum, so you would have to give a VIP invitation in order to enter, but the guards only ask VIP invitations to local Chinese. When they would see the foreigner, they would just let the people in because of the language barriers, etc. But actually what he did to reaction to that, he remade this public announcement and came in front of Shanghai Art Museum where it was written, Chinese can enter but not, etc., etc., etc. On the other hand, Ban's public space presents very complex struggle between concession authorities, colonial authorities, and Chinese authorities in defining actually how public space could be used and by whom, and trade profit, which was interest for the international settlement of the time. Ban, in a way, presents experiment in defining what public space is and where is distinction between the public and private. In mid of 19th century, Ban had 12 private piers owned by different foreign companies. At the same time, many of them built housing along the river, usually in a European-style building with 2 floors and a garden in the back that has been taken as a clear private space. But the space between pier and the private housing has been under the negotiation for many years, how it can be used and used by whom, that actually brought the development of the public space. So I'm going to just give you a brief, this is this very controversial public garden. And this is 1930s. Actually, if you, this sculpture is one of the early public sculptural works done by French, of course, at that time. And this is how it looks like today. It's a very fancy place. And most of the architecture was done by the foreigners in that, yes. So the next issue that I would like to discuss is the development of park and its monumentality nature. Because after Communist Party entered and liberated the country, they actually built a series of public parks around the country that will serve for people leisure, borrowing the elements of private garden and the royal gardens tradition, but making it public. So one of the examples is People's Park in Shanghai that is called People's Park or a People's Square, that before liberation was actually a horse racing track, but after horse racing was forbidden by the Communist Party, park became public area that is used to, for the state parades. Building of public people parks and squares in the city around China. So basically many cities have people park. It's not only Shanghai. Take political role of the public space governed by the country that is more performance of the power than a public space that could be used by anyone to express the voice. So, for example, the People Park in Shanghai is actually one of the most sensitive public space areas in Shanghai, because you have a Shanghai Museum, Shanghai Art Museum, city government, and all very important state buildings around. So when we want to do something without the permission, we usually avoid this city area, because it's always 24 hours looked at. So these parks, built after liberation in its function, could be compared with the function of the Tiananmen Square that you actually see. This is an old picture from 1988 that is translated as a gate of heavenly pacification, where square itself becomes a monument of power and respect, and where gathering of big events organized by state happen. That is one of the reasons why these symbolic monuments of power have been usually taken as a point of departures for protest, as a protest that happened in 1989 till today. For example, we had a few years ago a Jasmine protest that came from Middle East, and actually a very short time, of course, but all gatherings happened in the People's Square, in the People Park. People's Square or Tiananmen till today perform this role. Building of the squares around the country could be taken as a monument of the power that in a way expands our understanding of art in the public space as a monument that is usually presented in the form of sculpture. These spaces, built according to the Chinese scholar Wu Hong, have a strong characteristic of monumentality that can bring a parallel with those to the emperors of traditional China and their performance of the power to building of the capital cities as a monuments and the place where important ceremonies and events organized by emperor taken place. Besides building of monumental spaces, the monumental sculptures of Chairman Mao appeared in the front of many public buildings, university campuses that could be seen till today. Soviet social realism aspect of monument representation of Chairman Mao continue to live today. I just want to show you, these sculptures are same basically in every city. My campus had the one that was all in the middle. And this is a recent huge construction in Changsha that actually, I think his shoulder, it's around 15 meters, one shoulder. So it's huge. And it's one of the rare public sculptures that actually shows Chairman Mao as a young, at the younger age. Before I continue, I would like to show you a very short section of the film. It's done by the Chinese artist. She used to be based in Guangzhou in South, now she's in Beijing, Cao Fei. It's a female artist. She did a lot of very amazing works, including the R&B City. So basically, her father is one of these country's artists, state artists, that he produced Mao's sculpture all his life. It's 88 minutes. It's a beautiful movie. Where actually she followed her father wherever he went to produce one of these big Chairman Mao sculptures. He's a very important state artist. There's like 2 of them. So I just give you a brief idea.
我说他还在创作的上升期，还没到顶峰，因为他经历了就是罗丹90多岁还搞雕塑的，你要跟罗丹比，你还有20多年。 我说曹教授最辉煌的作品还没出来。咱们中国呀，咱们中国真正能够搞现实这个东西的，南方北方不多的。北京我认识一个陈远贤，南方的话就得数曹承恩了。
為咗紀念白色起義75週年，為咗紀念白色起義75週年，為咗紀念白色起義75週年。 為咗紀念白色起義75週年，喺番禺南村有人整咗一個好大嘅鄧小平銅像。
坐咗啲你唔使喐啊，你唔使喐。
冇錯嚇
攞住起身嚟睇睇，唔係左擺睇睇啊。係。
你未最後完成嘅係嘛？
未咗上色，基本現在仲有上色。
係上咩色啊？
上古銅色就呢種色，都銅顏色嘅。做咁大隻咧，我都好少。 但係好似我嚟講，70幾歲能夠爬咁高啊！我講好少，從頭到尾都係我做嘅頭幫手。領袖招數要似係嘛？唔似又唔得係嘛？唔做一般解放軍用啲啊，總係似一個人啦。但係領袖者始終似一個領袖。特別鄧小平呢個像咧係影歲壽嘅形象，係自己想像出嚟嘅，自己總合出嚟嘅。
自己想像。
自己總合鄧小平形象嚟做出嚟嘅。呢啲係紀念品。係啊，呢啲係啲贈送品，75個。
So basically, it's a whole industry behind with this small sculpture.
送去俾外賓啊，75週年啦，75個啊，有 number 邊度㗎？
哦，有 number 㗎。
佢中央有個代表團嚟係嘛？幾十人嘅咪贈一個係嘛？咁咪都咁樣贈送啊，幾萬買。
So this is a sculpture of Deng Xiaoping that you probably understood is very important for the opening of China.
哦，呢個係南村口啊，未到啊？呢個熱咩？ OK，前面那个几万对吧？对，有的。
So these are basically all limited editions that were actually given as a present to the officials, etc.
我搞幾個工程都唔夠張喎，啊？想做這個拍紀念品。快啲咯！攞啦，快啲！快點啦！ 你多少了？10張。啊，10張，快了。啊，屌你媽，仲趕得切咩？夾得咁啊，夾起身啊！你幾多寫？夾你唔得做乜嘢？因為你簽名嘛，簽名簽名買。對，呢個是俾佢。反正你交給你咪得咯，唔使一年先得嘛。你跟那個對啊，上面有嘛，通通寫進去到對什麼呢？反正這有60個都寫上去了，幹嘛呢？寫這裡嘛，1、2、3、6寫這裡啊，幹嘛呢？1000不用寫嘛，你就抄上去了，你不管了，誰要到沒抄？快點嘛，行什麼呢？時間緊那個趕飛機，我要趕飛機。
I just wanted to give you a last image of when actually sculpture is going around the town. And this is very existent, and it's in a way transition on its own. Today, I think in many cases, public space is somehow perceived as a space for exchange. That I will talk about through a very, even till today, I've been in China for 12 years. I'm always amazed seeing it. So although these places appear as interpretation of power, as I said, due to the rise of economy and commercialization of society, besides becoming a space of performance for state power, these public sites gain new role of sites where certain trade and exchange occurs, and it's in a way action purpose oriented. So for many, I'm going to talk about a very banal example of People's Square in Shanghai, during the weekends, where actually parents make regular gatherings in huge numbers of hundreds and bring photos of their unmarried daughters and son with this description, where they try to find their counterparts from the early morning till the late afternoon. So this is the scene where actually hundreds of parents come, and basically they try to find a wife or husband for their sons and daughters. And these people these are very young kids that they are looking at. So most of them are born after the 80s. So they have A4 size paper, sometimes very big, like what is their company where they work, what is their salary. It's very, very practical in a way. But I think it's really amazing that it's keep happening every single weekend. At the same place, there is hundreds of parents. So this is this is one of the area, and how does it look like? So it's like a description with new, which is a female, a male, with a cell phone number, etc. So sometimes my friends, artists, Chinese artists, they are actually made to make these appointments that mothers and fathers get them into. Of course, nothing really happens afterwards, but they just have to be there. So, yes, and they are very randoms. Like this person was born in 1982. No, they said it's a bachelor degree and the salary and what kind of company he works, and the telephone number. So, and in the mornings you can see also on a regular basis that all people who retire actually come to have classes of dance or Tai Chi or any other classes, actually where they have teachers, and they provide a very symbolic money to be part of the class. But I think it's a very interesting way, and I think very China-specific for using public space. Even in the evenings in the parks, all the people will gather, and like 50 or 100 of them to dance, to have dancing classes together, which I cannot totally imagine in Europe, my grandmother dancing, but yeah. So, so I think one of the important issues of kind of redefining the public sphere in China is after the 70s and the ending of the Cultural Revolution. And actually, notion of danwei, we in English is translated working unit, because in Chinese traditional culture we had the actually sense of belonging to the family as the most important unit in the Confucianist teaching. But after we have actually notion of danwei or working unit, and actually it's a danwei working unit. It had a communal nature where actually through such a structure, many aspects of life and his or her individual lives were arranged and unified as an entity. So danwei or a working unit took care of every aspect of individual, including housing, entertainment, marriage, health, and study. So it was a very, very uniform life that actually influenced a generation of Chinese that are now 50, 60 years old. So danwei's collectivity not only took over the public space action into the work unit organized activities, but also organized many aspects of individual private lives that for many people today can that come from experience of belonging of a work unit can hardly distinguish borders of private and public, and I think that's still existent in the older Chinese generation. One of the work units was, for example, Shiye Danwei, that actually it's a non-for-profit unit, but actually taking charge of education and science. So basically, the whole country was organized in that system. So that changed with introduction of the market economy and opening of the China. that so during the 90s was a drastic change where actually state-owned industry started collapsing. So many of the downway or working unit actually closed. So there was a lot of people who lost their jobs and get a very minimal pay till today. But actually this kind of a shift in the society changed spatial and economic aspects of individual life. And I think changed the way how they perceive public and private. This change actually, I think it's very crucial. And today in China we have a rise of the real estate, and real estate prices gone so high up that you cannot really imagine how people live in China. But people still give all their saving to buy an apartment. And this apartment, if you buy a house, you own the house only for 70 years. So it's not owning the house for the rest of your life, but basically owning it for a certain period of time. So they're willing to give all their money for the children's house. And I think that's kind of fear of not having anything actually comes from this notion of this working unit that they actually came from. And I think this actually opening up of a possibility to buy apartment in the house drastically changed understanding of private and public. And I think generation after generation born in 70s and 80s, younger generation have a totally different understanding of public and private because they were born and grown up in a very different conditions. In the 80s, I think it's a very important period where actually rising of a public sphere in the intellectual field and something that is, we call it public intellectual, came as a very important focus in discussions. That is very normal. So opening door of China in the 80s brought to development of the movement of neo-enlightenment and unity of intellectuals towards East and West that right after Cultural Revolution returned to seeking for the humanity in Marxism, which is very normal after the Cultural Revolution, and everything that happened in the 70s. So this cultural fever of 80s was stopped in 1989 and students' riots in Tiananmen Square and started being rebuilt in the 90s, but in a very different nature. Because the intellectuals in 90s started reflecting on what happened in 80s, because there was in 80s there was a general search of democracy, freedom, amongst many intellectuals. But in 90s, intellectuals started actually reflecting and raised the question, because they understood better West, I would say, what kind of democracy we actually need, or what kind of freedom we do actually want, and what kind of democracy could be implemented in a Chinese society. And this is actually a very important period when intellectuals started kind of divided in the different clans. And at the same time, in 90s, market economy entered, and the most important thing is to become rich. And that was the ultimate goal and dream. So basically, spiritual needs and the role of intellectual became not very important. So, of course, in the late 90s, we would look at the very nationalist wave that existed, especially with the book that I think came out in 97 with the title "China Can Say No," which raised actually a lot of questions. But this differentiation of intellectuals in the 90s actually made of the caused actually the loss of the public realm, where they actually stopped exchanging their different opinions between each other in the public sphere. And I think this is something that, according to the many scholars is the case with the intellectuals today in China, that everybody speaks for itself, but they never exchange in conversation. And I think this is something that is important for the creating of the public sphere. And unfortunately, I think this is something that also was very much present in the contemporary art context, that everyone is talking on its own, but there is no actually exchange in the public discussion. So, for example, a very important scholar, Wang Hui, he would argue that from late Qing dynasty, including the 80s, all transformation that actually happened, including opening of China, happened under the leadership of the country. So the whole society is also built by the country, which means that actually there is no possibility in a way for building a civic society, which I think it's not absolutely right. But I think this is one of the open discussions, and I think democracy and building a civic society in China is still very much discussed issue, and it's one of the favorite issues amongst especially foreign medias, I would have to say. And of course it is an issue, but I think it somehow should be solved in a very specific Chinese social context that we still don't know how to be solved. So I would like to continue through introducing historically and very briefly the artist temporary, the basic history of artists occupying the public space. So one of the first artist organized exhibitions directly actually interfered with the public space is the Star Group exhibition. It's a very important historical show. Star Group was active during the 1979, so right after the Cultural Revolution, through 1983. After that, stopped being active. But among many members of the Star Groups were Ai Weiwei, Huan Rui, Wang Keping, Ma Deshen, and many others, and some of them left China. Exhibition was organized in response to official exhibition to 5th National Art Exhibition at the China Art Gallery in Beijing in September 1979. The group organized their exhibition in Beihai Public Park, east of China Art Gallery, hanging their work directly on the park fence of the park. The next morning, authorities proclaimed exhibition in public space as illegal, and group members acted with protest against the decision on National Day. This exhibition is an important milestone in understanding of relationship between artistic practice and the public sphere, and start some kind of negotiation that exists till today. So this is one of the some of the archival images I just want to show you of this important exhibition. And this is their demonstration. So I think this kind of negotiation of the public space really exists today. So during the afternoon talk, there have been artist initiatives discussed. So my question would you ask for permission to use these kind of things? Because usually we would not ask for permission if you really want to do it. So it's a very different approach. So so this is the other work in the 80s, done as intervention in the urban space in collaboration of 3 artists in Shanghai, Ding Yi, Zhang Guoliang, and Qin Yifeng. Ding Yi is a still very active artist. He's an abstract painter. But actually they did these cloth sculptures interventions all around the cities, from restaurant to entrance of the Shanghai Art Museum, Wusong Dock, East China Law University, including one of the busiest restaurants in People's Square that you see a photo. So this is... So during the 80s, there is a very blurred distinction between 3 cultural spheres that existed. So one was official, ideological, and another one is universities, and the third one is something as this, like independent artists. Of course, one of the milestones was exhibition in 1989, China Avant-Garde exhibition, that I'm not going to talk a lot because it's been so much written about it. But actually, it's one of the most controversial exhibitions where artist Xiao Lu and her collaborator, Tang Song, a few hours after the opening of the exhibition, actually made a gunshot in the gallery and made the exhibition closed. I think the situation in contemporary art practice really changed in the 90s, where actually artists really, after the 1989 incident, artists returned to their gallery, to their studios, and there was a very little artist activities in the public space, which of course is normal, but then in around 93, 94, 95, artists started reorganizing themselves. But at the same time, the differentiation in the public sphere in the contemporary art field also started, because this is also an important period where Chinese artists started getting attention from abroad. So one of the first international exhibitions where Chinese artists went in after the Magician de la Terre in 1989 was actually Venice Biennale in 1993. And that was also very important for Chinese artists. And this is also an important period where Chinese critics, like local critics, lost their, I think, power of speech. So there is a differentiation between critical discourse, writers, and actually artistic practice that till today actually exists, which I think is very dangerous for development of the system. And I think these changes actually happen around this period. But I think artists as well continue to work on the self-organized strategies. I'm going to show you some. This is in 1993. It was a very mild intervention of artist called Hu Jianping. He is not an active artist anymore. I think this is also an interesting period in Chinese art history because a lot of artists are very active in the 90s. Because of the commercialization and the Western interest, they basically stopped being active and chose another life path. But he now works in a TV, Shanghai TV station. So he did a series of interventions actually hanging his works in a public space. So it's just to show you some photos. I will be happy to provide you the contact so you can ask him to come. So looking at this project, actually there were different artistic strategies of distribution and communication of the work. And I would like to talk specifically on two projects that happened in 1994 and 1995. There were actually exhibitions organized by Hangzhou-based artists called Geng Jianyi. Titles, one is titled 45 Degrees as a Reason, and another one is called Agree to November 26th as a reason. So what he did in this series of projects, he basically, for the agreed to the November 26th as a reason, it's a very interesting attempt to reconnect artists living in different cities. So he invited artists living in Hangzhou, Shanghai, and Beijing. At that time, now you think it's very close, but at the time it was very big distance for artists to go to the Beijing and communicate their ideas. So there was not that many connections with artists between each other, but actually he invited the artists living in the different cities to actually do a project in their own city on the same day. And that was actually, after they did it, was documented by individual artists, and they produced a series of these postcards of the same size, but actually each artist designed their own postcard. And I think it's a very interesting because a lot of similar things happen in the 70s in West. There is a very important curator, and I cannot call the name, who did a series of conceptual books exhibitions in in New York, and he was very important as a dealer, but actually they were never aware of him, that he already did these kind of things. So this is actually a work by Shi Yong. Actually, it's a walk that he took during the one day. He would call a friend from his address book, from the public phone. He had a photographer with him, and then he would say the location to the person on the phone, and then ask for the next direction. So he would proceed with the direction provided by the other person, and he would have to find a telephone booth to contact another person to give them the direction. So basically, this was at the end the map that you see. So this is, I just give you one example, but this is another exhibition that was organized in a very similar way. It's called 45 Degrees as a reason. But I think it's a very interesting way of organizing and communicating their ideas at this time, which was, I think, a very sensitive time for artists to work. Another exhibition, I think, that happened and somehow is very much related to a commercial aspect of the public space was an exhibition that kind of introduced the younger generation of artists called Art for Sale. In Chinese is Chao Shi Zhan. That was organized by a group of very active artists today in Shanghai. And after that, they continued doing basically one artist organized project every year, but it's inviting artists and reconnecting artists from all over China. So what they did, actually, they took half of the exhibition was a part of the supermarket, and half of the exhibition was in a space that was to open supermarket. So basically half of exhibition was a regular art show, of course, and the other half actually was a supermarket. So artists produced the smaller works that could be bought for a very symbolic price. Now these are very famous artists, but at that time you could buy for a very, very cheap. So around 2000, museum and gallery boom started in China. So most of the artists' practices actually, and unfortunately, returned to the white cube space. At the same time, most of the art magazines in China started changing their strategies towards stronger and stronger impact of markets. So till 2005 and 2007, most of the art magazine will lose their critical relevance and importance of discussion for the art world, with a very few with the individual attitude. This happened, there was a very important art magazine that has been closed, banned, I would say. Recently it's called Independent Critic. It was a magazine that was published by Dong Bingfeng. He was the chief editor, but it was one of the most important magazines, and very few that I actually would read. But actually magazine got banned because of some of the issues on Occupy movement that they published a few months ago. So they had a last issue in basically, I think the last issue was the February issue, where they actually published some of my articles. As a reaction of the many artists, and I've been discussing today with one gentleman, the importance of the web and blogs for discussion. So in 2008, there was a boom of the artists runs small blogs where you could discuss, but I think it's a very also a tricky approach to internet in China, because till today we cannot see YouTube and no Twitter and no Vimeo and no Facebook. So, but I think it's a very interesting strategy where we have a Chinese version of Facebook, Chinese version of Twitter, and some kind of Chinese version of YouTube. But I think this kind of conversation and discussion happens in a circle that is very closely watched. So if you type in some comment that is considered sensitive, it will be deleted in a few seconds. There is some kind of discussion, but this discussion is very in a very small circle that I don't think is a very basic, is a very healthy environment. And another thing is that, for example, I've been hearing and reading some news that Facebook is actually going to come in China, but meaning that Facebook needs to kind of adapt to the Chinese conditions, and which I think they are actually trying to reach the Chinese market, and they are kind of giving up on a certain I think principles that they were posing at the very beginning. There is one thing that I would like to discuss, and besides this internet issue, I think a lot of artists lost the interest of involvement in the public sphere because of the museum and the gallery boom. So, and in a way, around 2000, I was saying today that Chinese contemporary art was actually officially accepted by the country. So I think we are still somehow undergoing transition period. But I think there is one group that I would like to mention to you. It's a theater collective called Grass Stage Theater that existed from 2005. It's established by a man called Zhao Chuan. He is the writer. And this is a collective of non-professional actors who were trained to the workshops, so anyone can be part of the Grass Stage Theater. And they produce the plays. They are always free. And they present plays in a public space, so basically as a public interventions, not only in a big cities like Shanghai or Beijing, but actually they go really into the China, like we call them second ring, smaller cities, and reach public that really never seen contemporary art. So I think they are doing a very important job that I think sometimes many of artists forget. And most of their plays, they are done by some kind of community workshops, and they are created together. So most of the characters from their plays are taken as the characters from the random life of the actors. So it could be a prostitute that lives nearby, or a very random guy, and putting them on a stage. I think it's a very interesting model of involvement, and they've been actually doing a small initiative called Wenhua Zhan, is like cultural stop, where they organize for a smaller group of people public talks, inviting the certain intellectuals to discuss on a certain issues. They don't have their own space, but they basically work as I do, so work with a different institution, or they just do it in a public space. And I think they've been existed and doing this kind of contribution for many years. They don't get any money from the government because there is no funding structure for this, and they don't get their pay from that. So every member has their own job. So it's absolutely volunteer work. But sometimes it's a full-time work as well, and I really think it's important. I also going to talk about this project. It's a first project that I did after I left the institution. So it was in 2007 in January, which was very cold. And it's a series of interventions that I did together with a discussion with artists, local and international. And basically the idea is to use the public space and to basically some kind of stop the routine of everyday life of people who are living there. So I'm going to give you just one example. This is artist called Gao Ming Yang. What he actually did for, I think, almost 24 hours, he played golf in a public space. So he started the play from his house, which was natural start very early, like 8 in the morning. I followed for a few hours, and then the cameraman continued. And basically, he would play wherever he would find a hole because he needed to complete the game. So he would go into the subway station. I mean, very different places. It's really amazing. And he played from the early morning till 12 or 1 in the night. So, and then there was one project, actually I didn't bring you a video, but it's a project done by artist Huang Kui. He actually would stand on one street that he chose, whenever a person crossed the street on a red light, he would come with 2 volunteers and would say, "Congratulations, you received the award." What kind of award? The best outstanding citizen award, and this is our contribution. There was an envelope with a little money and with the diploma, and people will take a photo with him and take money because, of course, and then they will leave, but in the envelope will be, this is a project, blah, blah, this and this artist, you cross the streets on the red light, etc. So we did this kind of smaller interventions. This is a project that I actually was invited to do. I would never start a project like this on my own. It was called Intro 366. It was done all the way from 1 year, so 366 days. It was a museum-initiated project. Zendai MoMA, Zendai Museum of Modern Art, actually director-initiated project to get the works out of the museum in order to try to somehow reach the new public, because I think it's a very nice idea and important, because a museum as a tradition is a very new thing in China. And we need to somehow build up audience or approach to the audience in a very different way. So it was a museum with me established a small team that was only 10 people that worked 1.5 years on a project. So basically, we would have 1 artist project per day, which was really crazy. It's not really because it's not only about producing a piece of work, but you would have to find a public space that will host it. And I think that was, first time that someone from the art system is trying to approach to the very different fields to collaborate on these kind of projects. And we had 2 colleagues who actually only work on that. So they will go to the shopping malls, different public spaces, and try to get people to host our project, which really wasn't easy because we speak very different language. I mean, people in the art world with the people who maybe really rarely go to the museum, or they're renting the space for the different commercial usages. So I think was a very important challenge for us to learn how to talk to these people, which I think was a very amazing experience. So this was a project that we kicked off with the press conference. Project proposal by artist Gu Wenda. He's an important artist since 80s. He used to live in US, now he returned to Shanghai. So basically, Gu Wenda, a year before we started Intrude, he did this project in Holland where he proposed to cover one church with the lanterns. These are the red lanterns. So actually, he had this project that he wants to cover Shanghai Highway, this is Shanghai Highway, with the red lanterns. So we actually tried to start up the project basically announcing this open proposal and seeing would anyone from the officials would pitch to the project, because this is a very huge thing. But this project still today stay unrealized because yes, it's a very different environment, so I think sometimes you're very lucky here that you could do things. This is another project that I just want to give you an idea, because some of the projects were interventions-based, some of them were installation that actually stay in a space for 3-4 months. etc. So this was also one of the first project that happened January 3rd. Actually, this is supposed to be projected on a big shopping mall near People's Square. But we got information that they don't want to do it like 3 days before artist was about to arrive. So I think she was, or she was in a plane when we figured out they don't want our project, which really happened a lot. So, and she arrived, and when we basically decided to do guerrilla interventions. So what we did, we had this power electricity mobile thing. We had a DVD, video projector, and we had everything, all that in the van. And we did basically one-night intervention. So we projected the eye, basically, on a certain buildings that artists did the research before that. So, yeah. So, and and most of the actually projects were done without public permission, because of the intensity of projects that we had, and sometimes the projects were done in a collaboration with the host, that host the project in the public space. So we somehow try to avoid that in the whole process, which would make our work much more difficult. Of course, we had some issues during the project, but I think after the project ended, actually, I think this project in a way is a very interesting promotion strategy for the museum as well. Of course, because it's been so many things that we did. We also had a magazine, especially for this project, which was distributed, etc. So, but I suggested to the rector to keep one office, or maybe 2 people only, inside the museum that will continue dealing with the art in public space. Something like Blair mentioned, some kind of a creative time model. Because the negotiation that we started during the 1-year period was really only beginning. It's really, really difficult. But my decision wasn't taken into account because the museum has its own future plans, etc. But I think it was a very interesting proposal for the new conversation and art projects to happen. We did one project that was extremely difficult to do by artist in Limu. He actually he proposed collaboration in juvenile center in nearby Shanghai that actually treats prisoners under 18. So took us half a year basically to negotiate the project inside. I never managed to get in because I was foreigner. There are very strict regulations. So basically what he did, he would go to a juvenile center once a month to do a workshop with a selected group of kids there. And he built up the art library for them inside the juvenile center. But we went through a very strict procedure that basically that every book that he got in had to be examined. So even some of the very basic work that deals with the nudity, like Picasso, the pages had to be torn. So, but I think it's a very, I think this kind of work was never done in China before, and Limu did an amazing job because not every artist can do this kind of project. But I think it's a very, it's a very important that these kind of projects are done in a more capacity in the future in China. So this is the actually magazine that I said it's a band. And this was actually the last issue. Yes. And they had one of special issues on institution for the future. So, yeah. So, and I want to just briefly talk, I have no idea what's the time, but almost finished, yes, almost. And some artist strategies how to rebuild the public sphere, because I think it's a very, very fragile in contemporary art world. I think it's a very big issue that should be solved, especially amongst generation that is growing as an active artist. How you actually rebuild the public sphere on a local level, and how to basically learn to communicate with each other. And one of the attempts was a project by an artist called Liu Ding. He's an artist and an active curator. And he started this project called Liu Ding Store. It's actually, there is a website, but actually part of the store, it's a project inside called Conversation that I actually see as an important negotiating process of establishing possibility of intellectual exchange, where actually he invites different people to get into a conversation with him. Conversation are photographic documentation and sound recording of non-public conversations with other artists or cultural, artistic or cultural practitioners in a specific context. These conversations take place without public to eliminate any performance or didactic speech, to open up space for in-depth discussion for both sides without compromise. It is a free exchange of thoughts and ideas. It's not an interview and it's not debate. Conversation are proposed as a product that could be purchased from the store as any other item. Projects such as Conversation comes out from the context of contemporary art in China and its lack of intellectual exchange, where most of the debates turn into the performances in front of the audience. Ours is part of it in a way. And artists as individual propose a strategy that without institutional support and other existing frameworks that we work in, this move is proposal for search for format of independent view, point and experience that could be beneficial for both sides, including Liu Ding himself and his counterparts in Conversation. At the same time, this talk don't require any goal and in a way put off whole final outcome that we always somehow expect in what we do. Developed through Liu Ding's Conversation, they developed the recent exhibition called Little Movements, 小运动, that was actually curated by Liu Ding, Carol Lu, his wife, and Su Wei, that actually include conversation and group discussion as a very important part of exhibitions. And these discussions are not open for the public. These recorded video documentation are part of the exhibition as a final display, but actually provide some kind of new format for negotiating effective discussion in a specific environment that we work in. Although these actually discussions are not public, but they are later uploaded, but I think they're a really important attempt to talk and exchange ideas with intellectuals and people who really work inside the field. So he invited very different people. I was in one of the sessions, was me and him and Carol. But basically, he would announce that will happen, the discussion will happen on his blog, and later he would just show one photo of with the empty chairs and one photo just as a documentation. But I think these kind of things are very important of where we are. And another project that recently came, that appeared, and I think it's also very important, three of artists, Hu Yun, Li Mu, and Lu Pingyuan, actually started a digital publication that is actually monthly magazine, just simply called PDF. They are planning to publish 10 issues per year, and then at the end of the year, they will do a selection of the text translated into the English. So it will have some kind of physical presence as a publication, but I think it's a first independent artist-initiated journal in many years. This kind of thing was very active in the 80s. But we haven't had the independent artist journal really for like over a decade or so. So I think it's very important. The content is usually written by three of them. So, for example, Limu is now in New York doing a residency with, supported by Asia Culture Council that I helped. But, for example, there was a new museum triennial that was a lot discussed in China because some of the gallerists went. And of course, they have a very different perception and view of the exhibition that my curator have. So actually, he went to see triennial and write his own perspective on exhibition. And this kind of critical texts are very rare in China. So I think we are all very supportive to this initiative, and I hope that will last long. And another thing, and the last, I think, I want to discuss role of Ai Weiwei and his contribution towards providing some kind of basic platform for social engagement. That I think it's more important than actually his artistic practice in China. Of course, I think it's very clear that only few people, such as Ai Weiwei, can do what he does because of his background. But I think it's very important to acknowledge that people with his background will choose a very different path from him. And I think this is why I really appreciate his work. He actually made a very clear attitude towards the system in 2000. He created this show with Feng Boyi called Fuck Off that I mentioned. It was actually a satellite exhibition of Shanghai Biennale. And it was actually first biennial that was supporting contemporary art to be presented in an official museum. So fuck off was translated in Chinese, and in Chinese was not to cooperate way. So where he gave a clear statement where his position is and where it actually, I think, stayed till today. He made a series of films that I don't think they have been ever shown abroad before, where he actually, with the team, he has a group of people, lawyers, activists around him, and a group of assistants who work around him, and they made a series of documentaries trying to document very sensitive cases case of suppressed individuals in China, and these cases are usually not really discussed in the public realm. So he would produce a film, and of course try to put it online, but will disappear in a very short time. But what he actually did, he started producing DVDs. And basically when he produces DVDs, he's just sent to the people he knows. So whenever one film is done, I get maybe 10, 15 copies, and I just give to the friends. And this is the film that is actually dealing with the case of one of the lawyers who was protected by the Ai Weiwei, tried to be protected by Ai Weiwei lawyers in Sichuan after the earthquake and whole corruption issues, because a lot of schools, as you know, fall apart and kill a lot of children because they were not properly built, etc. So one of the lawyers studied this case and got some facts out. So, and this is also the documentation of the moment where he was attacked by the police in his hotel room. Actually, he didn't manage to document the image, but he had a sound documentation that I'm going to show you. So you will learn a little bit of Chinese. So where actually police tries to get in the door, it was 3 in the morning. He asked, who is it? They said, it's a police. So he said, what do you want? It's a check. What kind of check? It's a regular check. Opened the door. They said no. And then he tries to call the real police, actually, but then they smashed the door and they hit him, and then the whole thing starts. And he filed the case on this, and of course this policeman never really admitted that someone hit him because it was dark and no one from his people was there. But I think one of the important issues that he always says is like never turn off your camera. So he was really documenting most, I think, some of the amazing cases that no one really dares to talk about. And I think that's his huge contribution. There was a case of the guy I was telling to Blair a few years ago, the case of the young guy who went to the police station to kill 7 policemen in like 15 minutes by knife. And IWA started to follow the case. Of course, he was very quickly executed and he got the lawyer that was state provided him. But his mother was in prison while he was in prison. And it's basically the case that was staged by the state. And I found out that, and it's a very, probably if you see that movie, you've never seen something before like that. It was really shocking for me. So I think through his documentary film projects, he actually tries to document very important cases as a part of the another history that we usually, as ordinary people, cannot do that, but he can do it. Let's just show very quickly. And this is 3 in the morning. So he asks who, what policeman, what policeman. So he said, we're coming from police station. Why you are knocking my door in 3 in the morning? I need the ID.
其实说从何老师来的哈，对吧？你让他打开我们的解释好吗？你凭什么我给你打开？我怎么知道你是警察？
How do I know that you're a policeman? Do you have a proof? I won't open the door. And then he tries to call the police and that he is in what room and that someone is trying to get into his room. And then smash the door. And they keep saying, open the door, it's the police, etc. So they are in there. So it says, why you are hitting me? I'm trying to call, because you're trying to call, he said, I'm trying to call 110, which is police. Then he says, why you hit me? He said, I didn't hit you. Who saw it? He said, you don't have a proof. And then say what kind of policeman you are. Maybe you can lower the sound. Yeah, so maybe you can play because, yeah. And I would, one last thing that I would like to just very briefly say, it's a project by Tino Segal. He does these constructed situations that I showed in China last year, and I think that worked very well and as reestablishing public space inside the museum. I showed the piece that is called "This Is Exchange." I think all his work never has a documentation in terms of like video documentation and photography documentation. So all works basically exist temporarily between the interpreter and the audience that takes part. He employs very different people to execute the work. For This Is Exchange, he actually, I had to find people with market economy background to discuss the market economy with the audience. So it was totally a new field for me, but I actually tried to find, involve the lawyers, people who work in media, people who are working in investment, etc., to execute the piece. And he has a limit in age, so cannot be younger than 30. So a certain group of people that is very difficult to basically involved in the art piece, because he has a very strict rules that they work in a shift. So they basically work as a sculptors in a space, so they need to stand there for 4 hours and then shift in another 4 hours. So whenever the museum is open, that piece is there. Basically works as interpreter, as he calls them, comes in and say, hello, this is a piece by Tino Segal called This is Exchange. This piece is an offer. I would like to offer you to pay you half of the ticket that you pay for the museum entrance if you discuss market economy with me for a while and tell me your opinion. So are you interested in this offer? Yes, and if you are interested, the conversation continues. And actually what is beautiful about his work that he actually managed to sell these non-material projects, which I'm also very interested in. So he basically sells this work in editions of 4. And I think he introduces a very different notion of the product, art product, that actually really kind of challenges our system. Because he started around 2000 and a lot of people really didn't accept his work. But anyway, I think this piece related to the market economy worked perfectly in China, and people are really willing to discuss. So in the gallery space, around interpreters, sometimes you will find 10 or 15 people, just a regular audience, discussing the market economy with each other. And I think the people will stay for hours actually to talk. We were very concerned that audience maybe will not discuss it because they were thinking that Chinese audience is a little bit shy expressing public opinion, but actually a piece works perfectly. And I think it's a very interesting small intervention of establishing public space inside the institution, because the work is also not documented. So basically only at the end exists in your memory. And I think in a way it provides a new challenge for institutions, because when people enter the museum, they, like the gentleman before, like entered the church, but and their power of speech is usually taken away. But through work, he returns the possibility of discussion to the audience, and I think that's a very interesting model. How artists construct something new, actually. So I would like to end this. You should see his work actually is going to be shown this summer in Tate. It's a totally new production. But I think I'm generally very interested in artists who are not providing a critique to something, but they're providing models for constructing something new. And I think this kind of artist or this kind of approach to the work in the art system is something that really gives the possibility of developing and challenging our profession, artists and curators. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Biljana. It's an extraordinary presentation ranging from 16th century Chinese concept
to Tino Segal.
Achieved even before. I think the other great challenge for Tino Segal recently was not only can you not document his work, but when you sell it, there's no paperwork, there's no bank transaction, it is done in cash and discussion.
And there is one more thing. And there is, there is no plane allowed, like flying in his work. So basically when he comes to Asia, he needs to take a train. So for example, I showed the work in Guangzhou, that's like south of China, and I had to take a train. It was a 28 hours train. Yeah, but I respected the rules. I really respect his work, and yeah.
We have got over time. So
sorry.
But Biljana is here tomorrow at the workshop. She'll probably be here tomorrow evening for the discussion taking place. Here's an audience member. I'm sure if anyone has any sort of burning questions or thoughts or things you'd like to pick up with her, she'll be very happy to do that over the next 24 hours just privately. Or you can revisit some of this talk hopefully on the SCAPE website in a few days. But thank you all so much for coming and for your attention. And again, thank you for